Okay, the negotiation. Congratulations, you're on the home stretch. If you have an offer in hand, it means you made it through the worst of it. I'll walk you through the rest. And if you don't, this is still important material to brush up on so you can handle this moment well when it comes. First of all, let's talk about the process of negotiating an offer. To begin with, you need to prepare yourself. Like in any situation, you have a little bit of homework to do. So think about and write down, what is your BATNA? And in any negotiation, your BATNA is your best alternative to no agreement. And so in this situation, if you have a job and it's going well, maybe you're going to get promoted and this is opportunistic, then your BATNA is strong. If you're unemployed and you're looking for a job and this is your only offer, then your BATNA is not as strong. Their BATNA matters and your BATNA matters. And it's going to impact the anchor point for leverage in negotiations and how you approach the situation in terms of if you're risk averse or if you're risk seeking. And then it's really important to think through, what do you want and why? And not what do other people advise that you should want, but what do you truly want? Are you in a situation where you want to care about base salary and managing risks in your life? Are you in a situation where that's healthy, but what you really want is upside from a financial perspective? Or do you just want to put yourself in a position where you can get promoted and take on leadership opportunities? Think carefully about this because it matters in what you ask for. It also matters in how you present what you ask for, because at the end of the day, the why and the reasoning helps you achieve your goals. And then what is market? Do some homework. More and more companies are posting salary ranges, not necessarily bonus and equity, so it can be deceiving, but salary ranges in job descriptions. It's required in certain states. Wellfound.com has a lot of information here. Other sites will have information as well. If you have an offer and you don't know where it sits in the spectrum, feel free to email it to me. And I see a lot of offers on both sides of the table. I can help you understand, is this 50th percentile, is it 20th percentile, is it 90th percentile? Understanding what market is really important in your anchoring. And then from a process perspective, the second you get an offer, you want to take this opportunity to not jump forward and take it, but also not to immediately start asking for things, but simply to clarify the offer. And I mean walking through each component, because the details matter. You can't possibly articulate exactly what you want until you see the whole picture. If you have two different opportunities, but one of them has $500 more per month for the same insurance coverage, which you didn't uncover at the very beginning of the offer, that really adds up over the year. Or if one has 3% 401k match and the other one doesn't, you need to make sure you have the full picture. Also, it's a good opportunity to set the tone. That you're not desperate, but you're not greedy, and you just are methodical and mature, and this is really how you want to handle this whole situation, because it's important that you build a strong, positive working relationship here, especially if you end up taking the job. These are the people you're going to work with, and so you want to set the tone well. You're finishing the interview process. You haven't even quite finished the interview process because the negotiation is part of the last taste that they have in their mouth before they bring you on board, and so you want to handle this really, really well. And clarifying the offer is a good opportunity to stop for a second, make sure you fully understand it. And in the next section, we'll go through each of the components that I suggest you ask about. And then read the situation. And so, for example, one of the things that you're looking for is, who are you specifically negotiating with? Who do you think the decision maker is? And it may adjust how you present what you want. If you're talking to a recruiter, but you're really negotiating with the VP of product, and frequently this will be the situation, especially if the recruiter is from an outsourced firm. If the recruiter is from a recruiting firm, then that recruiter likely gets a commission or a bonus if they close the deal and you join. And so they're in favor of getting whatever you want in order to close the deal. And so they're actually on your side sometimes when it comes to the finances, because it's not their money that they're giving up. They're just trying to get a match done and get you closed and move forward. And so think about who you're talking to versus who you're negotiating with, and how to find that right balance where you can really make sure that everybody's happy. And you want everybody to be happy at the end of this. That is the goal. Also, think through competition on both sides. What's your competition in terms of, if they don't hire you, where are they going to go? Do you think it's a market where they have a lot of opportunity for folks like you? Or are you truly unique in this situation where you bring something to the table that absolutely nobody else does? And on your side, do you have 3 other offers that are hot? Do you have 3 other opportunities that are heating up that aren't offers yet but are meaningful? Do you have a strong job currently? And this timing will really impact how you can drive this negotiation through at the end. And then make sure you're solving for the long term. not just the short term. This isn't haggling over the price of a t-shirt with a street vendor. You're talking to a recruiter, you're talking to a hiring manager. And two things. One, if you're about to join this company, hopefully you have a long-term relationship with them, which is really important to build that long-term basis. And on the other side, even if you don't end up working here, recruiters and hiring managers move from company to company. And I have had recruiters call me about a job and then move to another company and call me and move to another company and call me across 3 different companies. And so assume you'll see this recruiter again and assume you'll see this hiring manager again, and use this as an opportunity to build a long-term relationship, which means your maturity and the methodical way that you handle this is going to be part of their impression of you, and that's really important. And then at the end of the day, when it comes to looking at everything and saying, okay, this is really what I want here, and then communicating your counteroffer, there's a couple situations. So one is, I've hired people where they didn't negotiate at all, and I actually think that was appropriate. So I hired somebody where they were unemployed, they were looking for a role. This was their only active offer at the time, but I thought he was a really good fit, so I was offering it to him. I was bringing him on, and we had published our range, and I was offering it to him at the high end of the range, and I thought it was a strong offer, and I explained that, and I told him that we really put everything together so that this wasn't going to be a drawn-out negotiation. It was just a situation where I was offering him something that was strong, and I believed it would get the job done, and I was truthful about that. And on his side, he understood his BATNA and he understood the situation. He also thought it was a strong offer, and he just said, yes, I'm going to take it, and then he started. And I think that was appropriate. Now, I've also had situations where it was a really hot job market and people had multiple offers, and I expected them to negotiate, and they did, and we worked through it. And so you don't have to negotiate. But what I will tell you is that if you don't negotiate, you want it to be because you went through this process and you understood market, you understood what comparables were and what other offers might look like. You understand what you're worth, and you understand what you want in order to be happy in what the situation is. And then at the end of the day, say, yes, based on my BATNA, based on the offer, based on market, this looks good, I'm going to take it. But don't take it just because it's the lowest friction course of action. And so if you see a situation where you think you can ask for a little bit more, or you should ask for a little bit more, then that's where you don't want to get nervous about this, because it's very, very unlikely that if you handle it with maturity, you don't want to be greedy, you don't want to be pushy, but if you just handle it with maturity very carefully, and I'll walk you through the style that I tend to see be successful, and you ask for something that's reasonable, then I have never seen that blow up a situation where later they rescind the offer because of that. Now, I have seen offers get rescinded, but typically it's because either something totally went awry, or there was a reference check that totally went awry, or the budget disappeared, they weren't going to hire that role anymore. And so that's not in your control. But in terms of asking for more money, or asking for more equity, or asking for more something, if you handle it with maturity, you almost always have an opportunity to still take the offer that they gave you. And the way that this tends to go down, and the reason I harp on this is because a lot of times there is a single sentence which is simply asking for something where you can get $10,000 more, or $10,000 more per year over the next however many years, or more, etc., just by asking for it with a single sentence. And you've got a fiduciary duty to yourself, to your family, etc., just to ask for this, because you get on the job and you're not going to be able to simply wake up one day and say, hey, can I have $10,000 more? And poof, it appears. But when you're in this negotiation, that might be the case. You just ask for $10,000 more and they give it to you. It's very rare in life that you can just ask for $10,000 and it appears in your lap. This is one of those moments. So take advantage of it if it's appropriate, and handle it well. My approach is this. What I tend to see not work well is when people are really greedy and they push on numbers and they push on money, and then they end up not taking it because they weren't really committed to it anyways, and they were just bidding a whole bunch of players against each other. And that tends to leave a bad taste in people's mouth. And you think about the short term, you think about the long term, probably didn't help you much in the short term. And long term, let's say somebody's making $150,000 today. 10 years from now, people that are really successful might be making 10 times that. And people that are moderately successful might be making 10% more, 20% more. And so the delta long term in your career way overplays the 10 to 20% differences here and there. And so really think about the long-term game. And so what I tend to see work well is when you decide, okay, I have 3 different opportunities, and maybe they aren't offers yet, but they are opportunities. And you decide which one you want, and you say, okay, this is the one I want. And you look at the market, and you look at the comps, and we'll go through each of the components of an offer, and you decide, all right, this is the situation where at this offer, at this number, I would take this job today because that's the point where it's worth it for me. And I really want to do this. This is the best fit for me. So think about best fit for you. What are you most excited about? What do you want to do with your career? What do you want to do with your life? And when you get that centered in, and then you say, this is the financial package where it would do it for me. And either that's where they are or it's higher than where they are. And then if you go to them and tell them truthfully, I've thought about all of this. I really want to work with you. And I want this to be where I spend the next 5 to 10 years of your career, whether it is or not. Act like this is a really long-term decision. You take it really deeply and importantly. And here's the package where you're not trying to get the most in the market. You're not trying to be greedy, but this is where it would make sense to you. So it'd feel good financially given the market and other opportunities. And at that point, you would sign today and you'll turn off all of your other processes. You don't have other offers, but you're expecting offers to come because you have other things that are in late stage. And at this thing, you would sign immediately. And be truthful about that. And if that's true, then you can set a really specific spot. And if they come back with that, then you sign and you're done and congratulations. And if they don't come back with that, then you have a few opportunities here. And so one situation is, let's say they offer 140 and you ask for 160. And they come back and they say, okay, well, we're offering you 150. So they moved a little bit, but not all the way. And you have this magical opportunity to just pause and say, and wait. And I've had these pauses pay more money in my career than is sort of fathomable. It's almost comical because a lot of times these recruiters, especially if it's a recruiter comes in and they have the package that's been offered, and then they have a backup plan B that they can go to if they need to. And so they come in with 150, but if you give them a second and you pause and you haven't said yes, and they're worried they're going to lose you, then they might say, oh, but I've been authorized to give you a signing bonus, or I could give you more equity, or we could also do this thing or that thing. And so all of a sudden these opportunities start arising. Give them a chance to offer you more. Just give it to them. And you're not even pushing yet. You're just, okay, and then awkward pause, and let it awkward pause. And then if they don't say anything, you can come back and say, just reiterate, like I said, at 160, I would take this today. That's what I think is reasonable. I'm not looking for the most, but that's what gets me there. I'm excited that you're moving, and I really want to make this work. Like I said, this is where I want to spend the next 5 years of my career. Super excited about working on this team. At 150, I'm going to need to sleep on this. And so I have a personal principle that any super important decision, I take a night to think about it and let me come back to you tomorrow. It's very unreasonable for them to say no to that because they didn't give you everything that you asked for, and asking for one day to sleep on it and come back. Then you've done a few things. You've given them an opportunity again to come back. So they could go and say, hey, I think we're going to lose them. Can we offer more? They still may come back for more. And then the next day you can have the option to say, you know what, I thought about it. I'm going to take your 150. I'm excited. Let's get going. And there's no harm done. Or you can come back and say, all right, 153, and you can come back with a final offer if you want, or you can hold to what you previously thought. You can come back with whatever you think is right, but you bought yourself the full slate of options. Come back with holding strong, come back with some final offer, or take theirs, and any of them will go over well. And you're still giving them the opportunity to budge on their own without even being pushed again. And so give them the opportunity to move on their own. And always make it look like the momentum is strong that you may do something else. And so never misrepresent something, but you can say, yep, these are really exciting, they're in late stages, etc. But you never want to make it sound like you're more excited about working somewhere. You just want to make it sound like you're more excited about the financial package somewhere, but you're more excited about working with them. Because then it becomes a collaboration where you and the hiring manager or you and the recruiter are saying, yes, let's do this together, but we just have to get the package to work. And you're both working together to find that medium point. And so that's where I tend to see this work well. And one final point here is close the deal. So time kills all deals. If you let this drag on too long, something could go awry and it won't finish. And so make sure you get to a point where one way or another, you're making a decision, you're moving on, you sign it, you get started, and you go from there. Now the nuts and bolts, the specific components of an offer. Remember, I recommended that when you first get an offer, your first step in your duty is to clarify the offer. So walk through and say, okay, let me make sure I understand this clearly, and walk through it all and either write it down or just clarify it if they've already given it to you in writing. And the different components to be aware of are base salary, obviously is one of, if not the most important part. And early in your career, this will be most of your compensation. And then over time, as you get more and more senior, you will likely have more and more of your compensation coming from things like equity or long-term incentives or bonuses, and a smaller portion will be your base salary. And base salary is much easier to research, especially today. And as I mentioned, if you have a base salary, you don't know where it fits, feel free to email it to me. I'll let you know how it benchmarks. Different companies approach this different ways. Facebook, for example, sets a 90th percentile target. They aim to compensate the top 10% of everybody in the market, and that's how they think about it. And then some people look at all the market research and aim for 50th percentile. Some companies don't have a strategy, and everybody is in different places, but there is a distribution in the market, and it's nice to know where this fits according to that. And typically you'll find that big companies have pretty structured ranges for an associate PM, a PM, a senior PM, and each of these titles will have a range, and those ranges are typically overlapping. Generally, if you get promoted from PM to senior PM, order of magnitude, you're talking about a 10% raise. The top end of a PM will probably get paid the same as the bottom end of a senior PM, and then the ranges get bigger and bigger as you get more and more senior. And at startups, it tends to be more negotiable, it tends to be more fluid. And then bonus. So there could be a year-end bonus based on performance and company performance. There could also be a signing bonus. And it's important to understand this. And when you're clarifying the offer, it just shows maturity to be able to say, okay, is there a bonus as a part of this? Is it guaranteed? Is it not guaranteed? Is there a signing bonus as a part of this? And you're not being greedy. You're not asking for anything. You're just clarifying. Yet you're also setting the tone that you know the components that could be in a package. And you're showing your savviness. Equity. There are many different flavors of equity, but the most common by far are options and RSUs. Options typically with private companies, and RSUs typically with public companies. You'll see a little bit of overlap though. And options means you literally have the option to buy a share at a specified price and then sell it to a seller. And there are different components of that option. So if you think about options, there's vesting schedule, which means if you have a 4-year vesting schedule, which is pretty typical, let's say they give you 400 options and they vest over 4 years, and the first 25% vests after 12 months. So in the first 12 months, you earn the first 100 options. If you leave after 11 months, you get nothing. But at 12 months, you get your first 100 options. And let's say the strike price is $10, which is what you can buy it at. And then there is somebody willing to buy it for $200. So you get these 100 shares, and with each one of them, if you bought the share, you'd pay $10 for it, and then you could sell it at $200, and the net value to you is the $190. Typically, options are only worth anything if there's an IPO and the company goes public, and usually employees are locked in for the first 6 months before they can sell, or if the company gets acquired, or there's some company coming in buying shares from people. And in those moments, you could sell to a buyer. Whatever the buyer is willing to pay, that valuation minus your strike price is the value of those options. And then also there is expiration, which means you want to look at this carefully. Most qualified stock options, if you leave the company, you only have 90 days after you leave to exercise your options, which means to buy those shares. So if you stay for 12 months and you have your 100 options and you leave, then you either have the option to buy those shares, and if it's a $10 strike price, you have to pay $10 per share, and you'd have to pay $1,000 for the options, which may never be worth anything or may be worth a ton. But you have to make that decision, and you can either exercise the option and front the cash, or you could let them expire. And so it's something to be aware of with equity. And that's generally how options work. I won't get into all the details here. This isn't a financial course, and there's other places you can get it. But I want to make sure if you haven't worked with equity before that you understand the fundamentals, because some aspects of this are much more negotiable than others. The vesting schedule, if it's a 4-year vest, which is pretty typical, the most common with startups is a 4-year vest with a 1-year cliff, which means you have to stay a year to get anything, and then you get 25% of your options, and then the rest of them vest either monthly or quarterly until 4 years. Some companies are longer term thinking. When I was at Flatiron Health, it was a 5-year vest. Amazon frequently does a 5-year vest. Whatever vesting schedule the company does, it's unlikely you're going to change that. You cannot change the strike price. That's legally set with a process called a 409A, where there's a valuation done by the company. But you can change the number of options that you get. And that's the main component here. And a lot of times companies think about it as a trade-off with base. And so they may give you sliders and say this base and this equity, or you could take less base and get more equity, or you could take more base and get less equity. And for one, it's a way to get a signal of how much you care about the upside. For another one, it's just an opportunity to give you a little bit of control about how you think about it. But it's also a way to make you think that you're controlling your own destiny and then not negotiate. And so you still have an opportunity to say, well, I see your sliders, but this is really what I want. And maybe take the higher base, but also say you want some more equity because this is what you think is market, etc. So just because they give you sliders doesn't mean you have to stick to them. You can still ask for specifically what you want. And so that's options. And then RSUs are restricted stock units, which are similar to options because they vest. So they'll have a vesting schedule of maybe 4 years and a 1-year cliff, where after 12 months, you get your first 100 shares out of 400 shares. But the difference is when you get the shares, you just get the share. So if the share is worth $70, you receive that. And if the share value went down to $60, you're still getting $60 worth of a share. So the value can go up or down, but you get them at whatever they're worth. And options could go underwater. So if you have the option to buy a share at $50 and then the company ends up being worth $40 a share, your options are underwater. They're worth nothing. And so that's something to think about. RSUs, you get taxed when they vest. And typically you'll just sell some of those to pay for the tax. And that's fine if it's a public company and it's liquid. So typically it's public companies that have RSUs. So that's equity in a nutshell, very simplified version. Look up your financial information. Elsewhere, I'm not trying to be a financial advisor here, but I want you to understand how this works so that you can understand, how to negotiate these in packages. And then when you think about benefits, make sure you clarify some of the details here. For example, insurance. I've seen people that had 2 different opportunities. They were looking at money, but one company where it wasn't clear at the outset until they asked some more detailed questions, it was going to cost them $500 more a month in insurance costs, which really adds up over the year. And so if you're thinking about that final number you want to ask for, you got to understand what the insurance costs are going to look like and coverage is going to be, and then also what the 401k is, particularly in terms of matching. If one company has really strong insurance coverage and 3% 401k match, then those numbers add into how you think about this total package. And so make sure that you understand the total package. There may be other miscellaneous things in here such that you're probably not going to negotiate these things. You can't negotiate a 401k match if they don't have it, or different insurance coverage. But you know those numbers so that when you go back to ask for the base salary or the equity that you're looking for, you're taking that into account and you're not asking without seeing the whole picture and then being disappointed later. So as you're clarifying the offer, make sure that you go through the benefits. And then title and level is really interesting, where you have these different bands, but one of the best opportunities to negotiate which band you're even framed in is during the interview process. And part of the interview is both deciding if you belong at the company, but also deciding what band you end up in. And there is some opportunity, depending on the situation, to negotiate a higher title. Now, at startups, they may just negotiate a higher title with the same compensation, and you might as well take it if they're willing to give it to you. At bigger companies, you may negotiate a higher title, which also comes with that higher salary band. When I was moving from LinkedIn to Twitter, I was a PM at LinkedIn, and I had a PM offer at Twitter, but I negotiated a senior PM offer at Twitter, and it came with a higher compensation package, also with the higher salary. With the higher title, which was nice for my career because that meant I was one step further when I looked at other opportunities down the road. And one of the reasons this is important is it's easier at times to negotiate a higher title coming in than it is to join the company and get promoted while you are there. Because getting promoted, if you do good work and you execute well, you should get promoted. However, there are a bunch of different things that go into annual performance reviews and promotions. Some of them are in your control and some of them are not. Maybe your manager loves you, is really supportive, but then your manager moves on, somebody else comes in, they didn't know you and they didn't have any past promises and they don't promote you. There could be some randomness in this process that you can't control. And so if you can control it and you can get a higher title coming in, then you might as well. And this is something that tends to be highly negotiable at startups and slightly negotiable at other areas. But again, it's one of those moments where if you could get that big jump, wow, that could make a big impact in your compensation over time. And then a couple legal details. You're not going to negotiate these, but you should be aware of them. So non-compete and non-solicit. A non-compete means you can't work for a competitive company for a period of time afterwards. And there are two components of this term that are important. One is the length, so it's 12 months or 18 months. If a company gets bought for a ton of money, they may give the CEO of that company that's getting acquired a 5-year non-compete, for example. But generally speaking, in a job offer, it would be 12 months, maybe 18 months, maybe 24 months. 12 months is the most common that I've seen. And so one is the length of time. And then the other one is the breadth. Is it a specific list of companies that you can't go work for? If you're working for Google Cloud, do they specifically not want you to go work for Microsoft or Amazon? Or is it a sector where they say, okay, you can't go work for other cloud services companies? Or is it really broad where it just says anybody competitive? And I've had non-competes that I was happy with and non-competes that I wasn't happy with. California, as framing, does not enforce non-competes. So if you live and work in California, it doesn't matter. But in other states and other countries, it does. And I had one non-compete one time in my career in an offer where I would have taken the offer, but I had an 18-month non-compete, and it was working for an ed tech project at a bigger company, and it was 18-month non-compete, and it was very broad. It said anything competitive. And I was interested in maybe starting a company in the ed tech world someday, and I didn't want to be so restricted that if I left that role, I couldn't do anything on my own for 18 months, which is a really long time in the tech industry. Now, when I joined Flatiron Health, I had a 12-month non-compete, and it was specific to oncology, which means cancer research. And I was very excited about working at Flatiron. I was very excited about working on cancer research. I thought that if I moved on and did something else, it would be either in healthcare, but not cancer, or in something else. And so I wasn't worried about being restricted by cancer, and that felt totally fair. 12 months in cancer specific, I was fine with that. And so that made sense, and it never held me back. So think about those. You can try to negotiate it and either change the timeline or change the breadth, but it's unlikely, especially with bigger companies. And then non-solicit means you can't hire their people away. So you can't leave the company and then go hire away their employees. And typically that's 12 months. And you're not really going to negotiate this. Also, you don't have any leverage to say, hey, why can't I leave your company in 6 months and take all your people with me? You don't really have any ground to stand on there. So just be aware of them because they're important components in the legal details here. And then another one is start date. When are you going to begin? And I always recommend that people, depending on the timing and the situation in their life, take a little time in between jobs because you won't always have this opportunity to know what's coming next, but have a moment to just focus on life and do other things and enjoy life in a way that you can't when you have a full-time job. And once you get off and running on this, who knows how long it'll be until you have a chance to take a break again. And this tends to be more flexible than you think. However, I will say that in a tough job market, again, to the same comment of time kills all deals, I wouldn't wait too long because if you spend, the longest I've ever seen is 8 weeks until somebody joined, and a lot can happen over that kind of time period. And during that time, if budgets change, etc., then maybe all of a sudden they cut the job before you start. There is some risk that that happens. And so the shorter the time period, the lower the risk. And a few weeks, I wouldn't be worried about it. But with 8 weeks in this job market, I think that might be setting yourself up for some exposure. And if you're okay with that, depending on your BATNA, then you can manage it accordingly. But I would think a little bit more on the risk averse side in this market if this job is really important to you. And then another thing is time to respond. So some companies give you an offer and have no specific time to respond. It is, I think, appropriate when you're clarifying the offer to say, okay, when do you expect a response by? And sometimes they'll be really specific and sometimes even very aggressive and say, hey, you have 48 hours to give us an answer. Now, what they're trying to do on their side is prevent you from shopping around and getting 4 different offers and then coming back and creating an auction process and trying to get the highest number. That's reasonable. At the same point, if you have something that's almost to the end and you can use this as momentum to get the other things to the end and at least get an answer, you want to get answers on as many things as you can so that you can have the right choice in life. And you want to take the time to be able to have the negotiation. Also, the negotiation itself is a way to draw this out a little bit. So if they give you 48 hours and you say, great, let me sleep on it, let me come back to you, I need to process this. I'm super excited, really want to work here, really love the team, just need to make sure that I am, fully clear on where I want to spend the next 5 years because I'm taking this as a big life decision, a big career decision. If I join, I'm all in. I'm going to be committed to this for a long period of time. And then you come back in 48 hours, you can tell them your position. Either you want it or you want it at this level or whatever is going on. But you can actually use the negotiation by asking for more, sometimes to drag it out a little bit, or just get what you asked for, and then that's cool too. And so be thoughtful about the time to respond. The time to respond is generally flexible. You can push back on this. Depending on the market, depending on your BATNA, there's different levels of how flexible they're going to be. But usually if they give you something pretty aggressive, there's no reason why you can't drag it out a little bit. But you'll probably need an explanation of why you're dragging it out. And so those are some of the components of an offer. At the end of the day, if you have specific details, you have specific questions, nuances, feel free to send them to me. I've seen a lot of PM offers at big companies, at startups, and at growth stage companies, and happy to help you make sure that you know what you're excited about, what you think is reasonable, and you go in there and you have the right approach. The most important thing, remember, long-term, you're going to run into these people again. You're going to have a long career. Get what you want. Don't under ask, but ask in an appropriate way. So if they don't give it to you, it's actually not a bad thing at all, because you can always go back and take what they offered you originally. So, I thought about it. I am super excited. It's not really where I wanted to be financially, but I'm so excited I'm in. I'm going to take it. You can always do that. Just don't leave anything on the table by not asking. But don't set yourself up for a situation where you're hurting your long-term career prospects here. So get what you want, get what you deserve, handle it with maturity, and you'll never regret the negotiation process. Just do your homework, and it's really not that bad. So good luck. 3 bonus tips. 2 about bonuses and 1 about equity. On the bonus side, signing bonuses typically come from an oddly different slush fund, which means that sometimes they're easier to get, especially at the tail end of the process. A lot of recruiters or hiring managers are willing to throw signing bonus at somebody in order to get the deal closed and get it over the line. And so if they've offered you X and Y and Z and you're very close to accepting, and you come to them and say, hey, we're almost there, I'm super excited to get started, as a part of this package, can you throw in a 10K or a 15K signing bonus? There is a chance that they'll give that to you. Now, it's not guaranteed. So they may come back and say no, in which case you do it with maturity. Again, you can go back to that offer that they previously gave you, and that's fine. But you may be surprised here where they might be willing to throw something at you in order to get the deal done. It'll probably come with a clawback that if you leave within 12 months, for example, that you have to pay it back, which is totally reasonable. I have seen this pay offer in a number of different situations. 0 to 20K for a PM or senior PM is probably your window. Above that, you're talking about more senior executive roles. But I've seen this work a number of times, and so it doesn't hurt to ask. You might as well. It may be the easiest $10,000 or $15,000 you ever made just by asking for it. Next bonus thing. Most performance bonuses are structured. So at a PM or senior PM level, there's probably not a lot of negotiation you can do about that. Either they don't have it or it's a 10% bonus or 20% target. A really senior level, you can probably negotiate some things there, and it gets more complex. PM and senior PM or associate PM, you're probably either at 0 or at some target. However, if you join mid-year, then there's frequently an opportunity to negotiate a guaranteed bonus for your first year. Because if it's prorated, let's say you're only going to be there 7 months or 6 months or 4 months, then if you don't have a full year performance evaluation and a full performance review, then it may not be a fair situation going into the bonus period where you don't have all of the track record and you are onboarding. And so it's reasonable to ask for your first years to be prorated but guaranteed. And that's a move that can work in a lot of situations. Now, final bonus tip about equity. The things to ask about, not just about the number of shares that you get, but in order to understand the full package. So I mentioned strike price, and we talked about the vesting schedule, etc. Now, the earlier on in a company's lifespan, if it's a Series A or it's Series B, the more important the percentage is. And if you look on WellFound, you'll find percentage as the equity component. And in order to calculate percentage, you need from the company the fully diluted share count. And remember that term, fully diluted. So if you ask for the share count and they say there's 1 million shares in the company, that does not necessarily include all of the people that have options that haven't exercised the options. And so it's possible that if you got a share count, but they didn't include options, that maybe there's another 20% in the share count if everybody with options exercised their options and then ended up with shares. And that's the real number that you care about. And so if you ask for the fully diluted share count, then you can use the shares that they gave you, whether it's options or not, and calculate what your percent ownership would be. And then you can model different scenarios to say, okay, if I have 0.15% of the company, what would that look like in a $100 million exit? What would that look like in a $500 million exit? What would that look like in a $2 billion exit, etc.? And you never know what the scenario is going to be, but at least you can scenario plan and see what it would be worth in different situations. And so asking for the fully diluted share count is a way to help you with that. Some companies are much more transparent. We'll give you a whole spreadsheet. We did this at Flatiron Health that says, this is the exact fully diluted share count. This is what you have. This is your strike price. And then this would be the value of your shares in different exit scenarios. And therefore, what the extra income you would make per year while you're working there is in these different exits. And that helps you be able to sort of bet on different scenarios. But nobody's lying to anybody. You're just deciding what you're betting on. The other component of that is make sure you consider the strike price. The higher the strike price, the more it's going to get diluted. Also, as companies raise further funding, they get diluted further. And so if they raise 3 more rounds of funding, there may be 10 to 50% more dilution, depending on the scenario and how strong the company is at fundraising and the markets, etc. And so you should assume if they raise more money, you'll have a smaller and smaller percentage ownership over time. Hopefully the shares will get more valuable, but your percent ownership will go down. And so a little bit of information that, especially earlier in a company history, it's important to be able to know. And then later on in a company, as it's bigger and more mature, it's less about percent ownership and more about just the straight value of the shares. But be aware of those components. So signing bonuses, sometimes they're a slush fund. Performance bonuses, you may be able to get them guaranteed in the first year. And then equity, make sure you get the full color around what the company picture looks like.